George Lindsay, the guy who played Goofy Goober Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show, was loved for his silly charm and big smile. But behind the cameras, things weren't always happy. Lindsay stayed mad for years at his co-star Frances Bavier, the lady who played Sweet Aunt Bee. On TV, they looked perfect in the quiet town of Mayberry. But one real-life moment hurt Lindsay so bad that he never got over it. This fight showed a hidden side of their friendship and made people wonder how one day could hurt someone for so long. But before we talk about why he was so mad at her, let's go back to his life before the show. George Lindsay was born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama, a small town with simple ways. His parents, George Ross Lindsay, a butcher, and Alice Smith, raised him with old-fashioned Southern values. He spent a lot of his childhood in Jasper, Alabama, living with his grandparents, and he always said that time taught him hard work and how to stay humble. Growing up, George didn't dream about acting right away. He loved sports, especially football, and he was the quarterback for his high school team at Walker County High. After he graduated in 1946, George went to Keyes Military School in Missouri and then to Florence State Teachers College, where he studied physical education and biology. Picture this. He didn't plan to be an actor at all. But life is funny and pushes you in new directions. George got pulled toward the stage during college plays. After he graduated in 1952, George joined the United States Air Force and got sent to Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. Those years in the military were super important for him. They taught him discipline and gave him funny stories he later told on stage as a comedian. When his service ended, he moved back to Alabama and taught for a little while at Hazel Green High School. But his dreams were way bigger than small town life, so he headed to New York City. George wanted to get into the American theater wing, a huge deal for actors, and by 1956 he got accepted. New York opened new doors for George, but it wasn't easy. He had to work super hard and take any role he could find. In 1960, he even went on the TV quiz show To Tell the Truth as a nightclub comic who loved spearfishing. It was a fun, weird way to break into show business and show off his funny personality that fans would later love. After he finished at the American Theater Wing, George got a few roles in Broadway shows like Wonderful Town and All American. But his really big break was still coming. So in 1962, he took a chance and moved to Los Angeles. He aimed high in Hollywood and started getting small parts on popular TV shows like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and even The Twilight Zone. Little by little, George was making a name for himself in Hollywood. Then, in 1964, he got the role of Goober Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show. And that changed everything. Okay, now let's get into the real story behind The Andy Griffith Show and the surprising bad feelings between George Lindsay, who played Goober Pyle, and Frances Bavier, the lady everyone loved as Aunt Bee. From the outside, Mayberry seemed like the perfect town where everyone got along great, but real life on set had its own drama. George joined The Andy Griffith Show in 1964 as Goober Pyle, a funny, lovable mechanic who always made people laugh with his silly moves and weird charm. Goober was the cousin of Gomer Pyle, played by Jim Nabors, who was already super popular. Lindsay was perfect at making Goober feel simple and kind-hearted, with his funny faces and that super awkward Cary Grant impression that fans loved. But as happy and relaxed as his character looked, things off-camera weren't always like that. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, was famous for being the sweet, motherly lady who always had kind words and hot food ready for everyone. But people who worked with her said Frances wasn't really like her character in real life. Actually, she was pretty quiet and kept to herself. She hardly hung out with the other actors and didn't have the friendliest vibe with everyone on set, especially not with George Lindsay. From the beginning, she had a super strict idea of how to act professional, and that didn't always mix well with the chill, joking mood of the rest of the cast. George Lindsay wrote about this in his book Goober in a Nutshell, which came out in 1995. He said Frances took her job very seriously and didn't always like the fun, easygoing feeling the cast had. For example, Lindsay loved joking around between scenes. He'd start silly talks, tell dumb stories, and sometimes use a little bad language, all just to have fun and kill time on set. But Frances didn't like that at all. She wanted a more serious, respectful place, and all the joking and casual chatting bugged her a lot. Lindsay said she was kind of stiff, liked things done her way, and didn't go with the flow when everyone else was just trying to have fun. Then came the day on Mayberry RFD, the spin-off show. That changed everything between Lindsay and Bavier. They were filming an episode called The Racehorse, where Aunt Bee had a big part. George Lindsay was doing his normal thing, joking around and maybe using a few bad words. He was relaxed and playful like always, but this time it really upset Frances. She didn't just give him a dirty look or say something quiet. She walked right up to him, yelled at him, and then, in front of everyone, she hit him on the head with her umbrella. And, according to Lindsay, it wasn't just one hit. She whacked him twice, hard enough that the umbrella actually bent. That moment shocked everyone on set, especially Lindsay, who felt embarrassed and mad. The incident didn't just ruin his day, it hurt him for years. In his book, he wrote that he felt super humiliated because other people saw it happen. He never thought Frances would go that far, and it made a crack between them that he said never fixed itself. Ken Barry, who played Sam Jones on the show, was mad about it too. He thought Bavier's reaction was way too much and said George hadn't done anything to deserve that kind of treatment. It wasn't like George hated Frances before this. He actually respected her as an actress, but after that day he said he never forgave her for how she treated him. And this wasn't the only time Frances acted like that. Other people on the show had their own tough stories about working with her. For example, Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass and directed some episodes, said directing Frances was like stepping on a landmine. He had to be super careful with every word, because if he asked her to move a few steps or change something small, she could get upset fast and make things tense on set. Sheldon Leonard, the Big Boss producer, also said she was the hardest person in the whole cast to work with, even though he knew she was talented. The weird thing about Frances Bavier was that she felt bad about her own reputation too. She knew everyone loved Aunt Bee, but she also knew she wasn't as nice as Aunt Bee in real life. In an article from 1966, she even said Aunt Bee was way nicer than she was. She admitted the difference between her and the character. It was something that really bothered her, and it might be why she stayed away from the rest of the cast. Later in life, she said this struggle with playing Aunt Bee got so hard that she went to see a psychiatrist for help. As time passed, Frances's actions kept her away from her co-stars. When Mayberry RFD started its third season, she wasn't on the show anymore. They didn't explain it much on the show. Sam, Goober, and Howard just said Aunt Bee had gone to visit her sister and wouldn't be back anytime soon. In real Fee, though, it looks like her tough relationships with the cast, especially Lindsay, helped push her to leave. Without Aunt Bee, the show kept going, but fans really missed her character. Even after everything ended, Frances stayed away from her old co-stars. In 1986, when Andy Griffith and Ron Howard, who played Little Opie, tried to surprise visit her, she wouldn't let them in. She said it was because they didn't tell her they were coming. But a lot of people think there was more to it, and that she wanted to keep her Aunt Bee life totally separate from her real life. However, near the end of her life, Frances did one nice thing. She called Andy Griffith and told him she was sorry for being hard to work with on the show. She apologized for how she acted, and that gave Andy some peace. Sadly, George Lindsay never got an apology like that, and if he had, he definitely would have put it in his book. For George, that bad feeling stayed with him long after the show was over. He held on to that umbrella moment because he thought it was unfair and not needed. Even though The Andy Griffith Show was a giant part of his life and brought him fame and tons of fans who loved him, the memory of that umbrella fight and Frances's reaction covered up a lot of the happy memories he had on set. Lindsay was adored by fans for his character and his own warm personality, but behind the scenes, he carried the hurt from that one surprising moment with Bavier. But here's another crazy story about George Lindsay that might shock you. People say he was almost picked to play Spock on Star Trek. Yes, Goober Pyle, the funny, simple mechanic from Mayberry, could have been the super serious, logical Vulcan Mr. Spock on the Starship Enterprise. This fun fact came out during an interview on TV Land's 4th anniversary Star Trek marathon in 2006. Leonard Nimoy, the guy who really played Spock, said that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had thought about giving the role to George Lindsay. The way Nimoy told it made some people think he was kidding, but there's more proof. Ernest Borgnine, the star of McHale's Navy, wrote in his book Ernie that Lindsay himself told him he turned down the part of Mr. Spock on TV's Star Trek. Borgnine swore it was true. Imagine that. George Lindsay, with his big goober smile and Alabama accent, playing the super serious Spock. It's almost impossible to picture, right? But, in a way, it kinda makes sense. Before he got famous as Goober, he had already lived a bunch of different lives. He was a college quarterback, a high school teacher, and even taught science for a bit. So putting him in a role where he used his real teaching and science knowledge isn't that crazy. If you're wondering how anyone even thought of it, it's cool to know that The Andy Griffith Show and Star Trek actually shared some connections beyond just filming on the same lot at 40 Acres in Culver City, California. You can even spot places like Floyd's Barber Shop in the Star Trek episodes Miri and City on the Edge of Forever. But casting George Lindsay as Spock would have been a whole different kind of connection between the shows. It's funny to think about what could have happened. Lindsay's Goober was all about light, silly comedy, while Spock was famous for his straight face, sharp thinking, and no emotions. Would fans have loved Spock if Lindsay played him? Would he have snuck a little Southern charm into the role? Maybe we would have seen Spock doing a goober dance on the bridge of the Enterprise. Okay, probably not. But the idea of Lindsay playing one of the most famous sci-fi characters ever is wild. In the end, the role went to Leonard Nimoy, who made Spock the legend we all know. But the fact that George Lindsay was even thought of shows he was way more than just the goofy mechanic from Mayberry. He had talent that surprised even his close friends and fans. Just imagine if he had said yes. We might remember George Lindsay in a totally different way today. But even without playing Spock, George's career was full of great moments. After The Andy Griffith Show ended, George Lindsay stayed as Goober in the spin-off Mayberry RFD. The show kept the same small-town charm of the original, and fans loved seeing Goober and the other familiar faces carry on the Mayberry story. Lindsay played Goober until CBS canceled the show in 1971. Even after Mayberry RFD was over, Lindsay kept working a lot. He showed up on TV playing characters that mixed comedy and toughness. In 1972, he played Charlie, a highwayman, in a Gunsmoke episode called Blind Man's Bluff, and played an escaped convict called the Dove in The Rifleman. These roles showed George could act tough and deep when he wanted to, proving he had more sides than people thought. Disney also loved George Lindsay. He did voices in some favorite animated movies. If you listen close, you can hear him in The Aristocats as Lafayette the dog. He also played Trigger, one of the vulture bad guys in Robin Hood, and had a part in The Rescuers as one of the swamp mice. Kids and families who watched these classics probably never knew, but Goober was right there in their favorite movies, making them laugh in his own way. One of George Lindsay's longest jobs was on Hee Haw, a show that fit his country roots and humor perfectly. From 1972 to 1992, George played Goober again, but this time Goober was a little wiser, a little more country, and perfect for the barnyard jokes and music. Hee Haw kept George famous for 20 whole years, winning new fans and keeping the old Mayberry fans happy. Outside of acting, George had a full personal life. He married Joy Herbert, and they had 2 kids, George Jr. and Camden Joe Lindsay Gardner, plus 2 grandsons. Even though his marriage ended in divorce, George later found love with Nashville businesswoman Ann Wilson, who stayed with him until he passed away on May 6, 2012. George Lindsay died from heart failure at age 83 in Nashville, Tennessee. He was buried to Oak Hill Cemetery in Jasper, Alabama, the town where his story began. Besides acting, George's heart was really in helping people. He raised over $1 million for the Alabama Special Olympics over 17 years with his George Lindsay Celebrity Weekend and golf tournament in Montgomery. He also helped raise $50,000 for the Alabama Association of Citizens, and he didn't just give money. He got involved, even coaching, at the Winter Games for the Minneapolis Special Olympics national competition. George's work showed he really cared about helping others, especially kids with special needs. School and learning mattered to him too. He started the George Lindsay Academic Scholarships at the University of North Alabama, where he had been a student. Because of everything he did, the university gave him an honorary doctorate in 1992. His hometown of Jasper showed their love by naming a highway after him, a sign of how much Alabama loved and respected him. George got lots of awards in his life. In 1995, he won the Governor's Achievement Award from the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. In 1997, he received the Minnie Pearl Lifetime Achievement Award, which was extra special because it came from another country comedy legend. Then in 2007, he got the first Icon Award from the Nashville Association of Talent Directors. On top of all that, George started the George Lindsay YAA Film Festival at the University of North Alabama in 1998, an event that still happens every year to celebrate new filmmakers. So while most people only remember George Lindsay as the silly, lovable Goober, his life was way bigger than just one character. From almost being the space traveler Spock to doing Disney voices and never stopping his charity work, George lived a life full of surprises and big heart. He's remembered not just for the laughs he gave us, but for the kindness he shared everywhere he went.